So when we last left John Richards, I was summarizing some drama that happened like months ago, but he's been busy. So where did we leave John Richards? So much has happened since the last time I spoke about him. I figured I'd just might as well bring y'all up to speed. Like in the days after I posted Adventures in CreeperCon, right? John Richards decided to do another video with a friend of mine named Nervardia, and the ensuing interview was very interesting.
Well, I do know that David Worley has been nominated by the public on several occasions by several people, and yet you have not quite yet put him up as a nominee.
It went like, I don't know, it's about as expected. Like, I want to remind you that I said in my previous video that to manipulate an interview out of David Worley. Now, I don't know why he would want this. He doesn't interview well. And I think he went on to prove it.
People, and yet you have not quite yet put him up as a nominee for the award. So would you be able to respond to that?
Complain to the public.
Oh, just... While I was watching this video, I realized a very interesting argument that Richards is super proud of his policy that's been approved by the Ancraft Trust. And I'm not sure if anybody has updated the Ancraft Trust on his antics, but whatever.
You have video evidence of Lance Gregorchuk threatening to sexually assault David Worley. Why has he not been banned from the convention? He has broken your service, your terms of service. You've broken your safeguarding policy.
How many times do you need me to explain? All attendees, whether they're staff,
you have explained this, but you have not actually answered
whatever they are.
Why have you not banned Lance from your convention?
I've not banned Lance because Lance does not have a conviction or even charges against him. You're asking me to act against
your
the
terms
law
of service.
You're asking me to be a criminal. I'm not going to do that.
I'm not asking you to be a criminal. I'm asking you to uphold the terms of entry. And he has broken the terms of entry before the thing had even started by sexually threatening to sexually assault David Worley. You have it on video.
Have you read our anti-harassment policy?
I have.
Now, it seems fairly obvious that Lance broke the fabled policy, and the statements that he made to David Worley are directly in reference to taking place during the event. And I took a look at his policy, and his policy reads, harassment includes, but is not limited to, unwelcome attention, verbal harassment, sexual harassment, deliberate intimidation, stalking or unwanted physical contact, let alone physical assault or battery. But this also includes harassment, intimidation, or other inappropriate behaviors on social media or other forms of communication.
You know what I'm going to do? When you come to the event, I'm going to put my hand on your knee. I'm going to rub it up your leg.
Lance pretty clearly broke the rules, but this is how John Richards chose to answer the question.
And clearly, Lance Gregorchuk has broken them. Why have you not booted him from the convention?
Oh, this is ridiculous. Supposing Tom, Dick and Harry had broken the policy before the event, 50 years before maybe, why should I try and prevent them?
Ago.
I want to keep half the world.
He did it 4 months ago in regards representing your convention. Why have you not booted him? Why have you not broken? Why have you not banned him from the convention?
The policy applies once you enter.
The true mark of a professional. But whatever the case, this brings up a rather reasonable argument that Lance, in threatening to sexually harass David Worley at the event, would then therefore be in violation of the policy of the event, and he would reasonably be banned from the convention. Doing so would, in fact, be a great show of force that would demonstrate that he takes his own policies seriously. However, John Richards likely just wants to protect his friend and have him at a party where his friend Lance is allegedly paying for. Now, this, unfortunately, puts a bit of a public relations cloud over his event, which is that it seems to be readily apparent that John Richards is not willing to enforce this policy, or at least, he may have some special exemptions to his enforcement. And given that he will not ban someone from the convention when provided video evidence of a violation, he may not ban someone from the convention on the basis of a credible complaint. So anyone that goes to the convention would have to weigh this risk against the desire to go to an event with Lawrence Krauss. Anyway, the interview itself is in the link below. I highly suggest watching it. And I told Nervardia that I think that she needled John Richards a bit during the course of this interview, but she did remain calm and collected throughout. And the thing that I found really interesting about this video is that you can have whatever opinion you want to about Nervardia's questions, but it is unquestionable that John Richards' behavior during the interview would be conservatively described as abysmally unprofessional, and a more accurate description of his behavior, in my opinion, would be that of a petulant child throwing a tantrum.
Hello, I'm John. Naturally, I don't want people to feel at risk of being molested at my event. How would that benefit me? Notice, Nervardia, I am not him. You see, I am not him. So why should I respond to your questions about another member of the public?
Did you write that policy before or after Lance's interview with David Worley?
How would that matter?
Has been nominated by the public on several occasions by several people, and yet you have not quite yet put him up as a nominee for the award. So would you be able to respond to that? You told me you've spent over a year organising this thing, and you're only doing it for one weekend.
Do I get to speak? Do I get to speak?
You do get to speak, yes.
Thank you.
It has been given, been given the nomination for an award. It's not a difficult question to ask and answer.
I'm going to explain it to you one more time, because it's obviously not reaching through to your brain. He's not receiving an award.
Well, why is he nominated?
You're hearing.
Why is he nominated for?
He's not receiving an award. He's been nominated.
Presenting your convention. Why have you not booted him? Why have you not broken? Why have you not banned him from the convention?
Fortunately, the law doesn't deal with metaphor.
Your policies, which you should have written months before you even started the website.
No, there was no.
I'm talking about his attitude towards feminism and women.
I am a law-abiding person. Yeah, I had Danish pastries and coffee. You're interrupting me again.
Yes, you're interrupting me as well. So I think that's only fair.
Let me start that.
Until you develop the.
It wasn't because I don't consider it to be important. I'm glad you're not perfect.
Yes.
What a suspicious mind you have. I have merely presented.
I am a skeptic, so.
Yeah, I've presented the. No, you're not a skeptic.
You are a skeptic.
Conspiracy theorist. You're a conspiracy theorist. That's what you are.
I'm a conspiracy theorist. I've done my research on this.
I have merely presented. I can't do better than that. Nobody can.
Now, look, there's ways to respond to questions that you perceive as unfair during an interview, but that behavior is just unquestionably not how you do it. But whatever the case, the event has been delayed to October because of a global pandemic. It could be delayed again, honestly, and in response to this interview making its rounds among some of the speakers, both Cosmic Skeptic and Stephen Law have dropped out, leaving only 4 speakers who may not even know about any of this. And you'd think that would be the end of it. But wait, there's more. Now, you would think that it'd be readily obvious that the main people responsible for these speakers dropping out of this convention would be John Richards and Lance Gregorchuk and their overtly obvious displays of the sheer lack of professionalism over the course of multiple interviews. But that's not where John Richards places the blame. John Richards places the blame squarely on the head of David Worley, as evidenced by these emails that I've obtained through Pagan Magic. Let's read his letter to Worley on April 6th. Dear Mr. Worley, I have received forwarded emails originating from you via our speakers and award nominees who were planning to attend the AT-I convention, originally scheduled for 4/15 April 2020 and now dated 4/15 of October 2020 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Additionally, it has come to my attention that you deliberately organized a rival event to compete with the Anti-Theism International Convention on 4/04/2020. And booked Aaron Ra, my keynote speaker, whose transatlantic flight and hotel accommodation ATI had funded. And this makes you a direct competitor to me, who would benefit financially by spreading misinformation about my organization. Now, see how this sets the stage. Richard takes no responsibility for the speakers dropping out of his convention, and instead, he's blaming it directly on David Worley, communicating this evidence to other speakers, which is strange for someone of evidence-based thinking to be angry about, but let's continue. In this screenshot, he continues to set the stage in the first two paragraphs, that he's identified 5 absolute untruths that are repeated in the various methods of communication done by Worley. He accuses him of targeting the Anti-Theist International Convention and bringing them into financial difficulty. But here's the best part. He's threatening to sue him for the losses that may or may not have to do with the pandemic. Now, a lot of people are losing money right now, and John Richards' conclusion is, oh no, this is David's fault. And this is the thing that's been interesting about manipulative people during this crisis. Do not underestimate the proclivity of abusive personalities to take advantage of a crisis to attack people. Now, we saw it a little while ago with Ben Shetler, and we're seeing it today with John Richards. Speaking of, I want to make sure that you
share this video with other people. So I want to ask you to share, because people need to know the facts. I'm going to ask you to share. Share.
Like and subscribe. Now, note that in the second paragraph there at the end, he says that he's certain that it'll be a 5-figure number. That'll be important later. He continues, however, I am more interested in an out-of-court settlement than financial compensation at the present time, so I am offering you a one-time only opportunity to rectify this situation. Here's how. 1. Stop contacting ATI's nominees and speakers. 2. Remove all your videos from social media that are designed to harm the ATI convention. 3. Issue a statement to all the people who you wrote emails to saying that what you wrote to them was wrong and that you take it back unconditionally. And 4. Do not mention the ATI convention ever again in social media. I don't know what voice I'm doing for him. But anyway, he wants to shut down his opponent with financial threats during a global pandemic and an economic crisis. Never mind that the backlash for the series of bad interviews is one that could easily be predicted. But we see you, John Richards. We see you. He goes on, if you do take these actions, I would accept this as an official apology and would take no further action against you, as long as you provide evidence of the completion of items 2 and 3 before the 20th of April, 2020. Mr. Worley, I am making this offer just one time, and you can decide how you want to take it. But any use of this letter or any other correspondence to promote your event or harm mine will result in my taking this grievance to the next level, and I want to give you a chance to rectify it before I have to go there. I look forward to your response. John Richards. His wording doesn't read very well. Anyway, bend the knee, he says. and I won't go after you with my threats of financial ruin during a global crisis. John Richards, in this letter, clearly makes threats to financially attack someone for sharing interviews that John Richards and Lance Gregorchuk did for their own public relations efforts. Now, to my knowledge, David has not complied with this letter, which I assume is why there is a follow-up, because of course there is. Anyway, Worley emailed him, asking him what the issue was, and John Richards spends the first 2 paragraphs essentially saying Google it, but then he starts talking like a supervillain. I want to make this simple, Mr. Worley. I'm giving you until the 20th of April to resolve this situation and agree with the following 4 points to me in writing that you will. 1. Stop. God damn it. All right. Anyway, look, he just makes the same demands again with a few caveats. And he wants David to issue a statement approved by him saying that, he wrote to the speakers, saying that what he wrote to the speakers was incorrect and that he takes it back unconditionally. And furthermore, he wants to be BCC'd on every email. That means that the recipients won't know that John Richards is supervising the retraction. This all seems really sneaky and manipulative, if you ask me, but I think that's fairly obvious. But he goes on to say that he's, quote, doing his best to keep this situation out of court. Man, this just gets sleazier and sleazier, doesn't it? He goes on. The losses which you have cost me are currently manageable, but only, all caps, if you agree to my 4 points and do them by the 20th of April. If you do not comply, my losses could actually go into the 6 figures. 6 figures, shit. As of now, we have several VIPs, speakers, and guests waiting for our answer as to your claims against my event, and we have promised them a response by the 20th of April. Man, he is really blaming David for his tough toodles. But 6 figures? I thought he was certain it was 5 figures like 8 days ago. How can he calculate this? This event has been moved due to a pandemic. How can he quantify what losses are due to that and what losses aren't? No one's buying tickets to an event in October right now. We're currently concerned about possible food shortages. But no, clearly a 5-figure threat didn't move David, so it must be upped to 6. He goes on, I expect a draft letter from you by the 19th of April as to what you will be writing the guests, speakers, and friends of my event. And if you agree to my 4 points, then I will take no further action. Mr. Worley, I am genuinely trying to do my best to keep both of our legal costs at a minimum. Yet I want you to know that anything less than a full apology, any date later than the 20th of April, will not be tolerated. I'm also available to discuss this matter via messenger. I look forward to your response. John Richards. The cheerful ending there makes up for all of it. I'm so glad that he's trying to keep everybody's legal costs at a minimum. Definitely a good faith actor here. No signs of manipulation whatsoever. Nothing to see. Nothing to see. Anyway, and look, the timeline. It must be by the 20th of April. It's like he's sitting there waving a clock in front of his face. Let's be real here. He promised a response to his speakers by the 20th of April. David apparently didn't do it. I'm recording this on the 27th of April, and his speakers list has not recovered any of the original personalities, and I don't foresee that he will. But again, that is purely based on pagan magic. You can trust it or not. But if John Richards made the promise, that's on him. And his tough toodles are his own responsibility. But are these empty threats? Or is he going to be so bold as to go after David for letting people know a few things and setting up a counter event? It's weird that he's going after David. Arguably, Mr. Atheist videos on the subject had a much bigger splash, or Rachel Oates did as well, but he's going after David Worley. My personal suspicion is that Richards is a bully, and he just wants to push around someone that he perceives as weaker. Links in the description below to Nervardia's interview with him. It's one of the more convincing things that exists about how tone-deaf John Richards is. As well as how fragile his ego is. Also, I put a secret link in the description with some obviously irrelevant information. Has nothing to do with anything whatsoever. But, hit those like and subscribe buttons and let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments. I really want to hear your responses on this one. It seems to me like this guy is just an absolute piece of work. But with that, hail to my patrons for making this content possible. It's good to have people at your back. And remember to find a way or make one.
So I want to ask you to share because people need to know the facts.